I didn't see on a board agenda, who has developed a schedule and openly sought certificated management employees to recommend it because he did not want his name attached to it.
He being the
superintendent.
Right.
Any certificated management employee can confirm this. There have been open discussion, and there is behind-the-scenes discussion about this all over the district.
Mm-hmm.
But what is being pushed and why is still a question. Now, I didn't mention that quote goes back to May 28th of 2014.
That you asked the trustees.
That I was told that quote,
we were told. Okay.
that one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I subsequently asked for forensic audits, and here this is still an issue today about what the problem is. And
when can I just ask you this? Might be kind of a dumb question, but when do you think the board actually was aware of this situation, that there was a problem?
When I started putting complaints in writing about the superintendent, there was reference to this sentence. I think it was in October of 2014.
Okay. That's a long time ago.
So, shall I proceed to number 3?
Please.
Discrepancies with recurring payments to an administrator for extra work days. Now, this is a certificated administrator, but there have been recurring payments of 20-plus extra work days, which, if you do the math, would take someone over a full-time job. What is unusual about this arrangement is that it is coordinated through the business office with provisions for COLA increases through the increase of the number of days. So, as you know, teachers got a 6% increase last year through the negotiations process. That was also applied to management and other employee groups. There is correspondence and evidence that I've provided that there was a calculation performed by the business office to increase the number of extra work days by the COLA. This is a perpetual arrangement that, given that COLA arrangement is highly irregular. I don't know.
Okay, for those people that understand or don't understand, that probably would include me. What does that actually mean? I mean, I understand the general idea, but what does that actually mean? So somebody that works 20 hours, right? And so everybody got a 6% raise. So what does that mean after that for that person that worked the extra 20 hours but maybe didn't?
Good question, because I tend to live in my HR world.
Yeah.
Let me help in vernacular an example. There are occasional times when an employee is asked to work some extra time, let's say 5 extra days, to perform this project for the district, because it's something that the district is willing to pay above and beyond your work year to do. As a teacher, as a classified employee, that occurs.
Right.
In this case, it's 20 extra work days, which is a pretty large amount for an administrator. I don't, frankly, know of any comparable amount of time. But then let's say that 5 days next year, we need that time, but we're going to say that everybody else got a 6% increase, so we're going to give you 6 extra days this year. Those COLA calculations don't enter into work days because that's based on extra work that's needed by the district. So that's one issue. The other issue is these types of arrangements are not coordinated through the business office. They are generated by the site, who might need approvals, but someone has a need for the work. That's what generates it. That's not what's going on here. This is an arrangement.
It's an arrangement. Obviously, it's an arrangement for more money for whoever this person this person is. But does it also? My question is: does it go on it goes on the retirement? So then that becomes a part of that person's ultimate retirement.
Well,
so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish.
So they get it on both ends. They get the money, and then they get this put on the retirement. Is that the way that works?
Well, that is a question that I also will include in this area. How are things coded to keep this simple for the public? There are complicated codings that occur in payroll And depending on the form of compensation, it may be counted towards your retirement, and it may not be.
Mm-hmm.
I've questioned how these things were coded through the business office, because if they were miscoded as retirement compensation, as compensation that would count towards your retirement calculation, that would possibly inflate your retirement pay, which would be pension abuse. So I have raised the issue of suspected pension abuse. And that is something that is...
But we actually don't know the answer to that yet.
We don't know the answer because John doesn't decide whether pension abuse is occurring.
Yeah.
That is a STRS question.
Right.
They ultimately have the legal responsibility to determine the facts. So there are questions that I had about the salary schedule and how those things affect pensions. And this individual situation with this one administrator who works the extra work days.
Who did not actually work the extra work days.
Well, that is, thank you for pointing that out. That's the other feature, is we received reports in HR that for that 20 plus days being paid out as extra work days, no work was actually being performed. Now, I offered that and asked for an investigation, and that never occurred.
Okay.
That's serious, Sandy. Giving public money for work that is not performed is something that deserves to be investigated and addressed. And I reported that to the board. Nothing ever happened.
Did anyone ever call you? Did any board member ever call you and say, or call you, not maybe call you, but ask you to come in or just chat with you about any of these things, questions or anything?
I had an initial meeting to attempt an informal resolution back in October. No one contacted me. No one asked me. No one investigated anybody that was involved in this that I know of.
Okay.
Period. End of story.
All right. So there was no inquiry from the board?
No.
Regarding any of this?
That's correct.
Okay, so are we on number 4 or are we still on number 3? Did you get to say, and how much of this did you actually get to say last night?
Probably 30%. I mean, I tried to skim. I did provide the written statement, so I had that on the back table. I knew I was going to have to summarize, but I feel like I skimmed in every area. So I appreciate the opportunity here to go into more detail so people really understand what I'm suggesting is a major problem behind the scenes in Newport Mesa. I'm not quite finished because I do, since we're into some detail here, I did, and I will quote what I told the board about this individual administrator situation. Now, for me, this would raise red flags as a board member and probably cause some communication, but it didn't. There are potentially serious compliance and public policy issues to resolve through the board, because obviously I've been unable to do it through the superintendent. My obligation as the executive director of human resources is to continue to seek appropriate investigation and action until all matters are brought to closure. I have been unable to find resolution through the superintendent and the normal administrative chain of command, despite many attempts starting at the lowest levels possible. Official duties now require me to come to the board for resolution to protect myself and the district from liability. Unfortunately, there has been a pattern of limited or no communication when serious concerns are raised with the superintendent.
And that was written on?
December 3rd, 2014.
To the board?
To the board. The board issued a report on December 10th. Never contacted me, never contacted anyone.
And that report said?
That report is something that is in those public documents that I'm requesting.
But you, all right.
And I'm not elaborating on that further at this time.
At this time.
So I think we're on number 4.
Yeah.
It became apparent from, and this is a current issue, this is really not part of my complaint against the superintendent in October through December. There's been a pattern of overspending by the board and the superintendent. That became public at the board meeting, the last board meeting. I did not attend, but I heard that there were comments from Paul Reed, that we were deficit spending and that we were running out of reserve. That should raise alarms to people. What I need to say behind the scenes is there are secrets going on, and I don't at this point want them to hurt any other employees, and so I am going to deliver a quote that was given to me in a letter from the superintendent on dated January 21st, 2015. Superintendent to John Caldecott.
That was the day before he told you that you were put on administrative leave, correct?
That was.
The
and
day
actually,
before.
I received the letter the morning of the 22nd because it was placed on my monitor. So, this is what I was told. A layoff expert, whose name I'm not going to mention, has agreed to help you develop a seniority list. This would be a certificated seniority list and verification letter process that can be implemented this school year. Contact this layoff expert, who I'm not naming, by next Wednesday to make arrangements to begin this process. Well, this list, everyone in HR world knows, is a precursor to possible layoffs,
Right.
program reductions, moves internally from one program to another, one funding source to another. This is what happens. Now, I'm going to mention this aside because it's a footnote that layoffs are traumatic for the entire district. We experienced it in 2010. There's a shocking level of lack of transparency, and that's why I feel the need to tell people this is what's going on behind the scenes. Now, normally, you can openly discuss, you can start planning in advance, years in advance, to avoid these things. But I see the spending going on, new management positions. Whether you've reduced one and added to others is not the issue. Use savings wherever you can to avoid layoffs. Now, ultimately, I'm concerned that the overspending will be resolved by layoffs on the backs of employees. And this will ultimately impact programs, the quality of education at Newport Mesa, not to mention the devastating effects on morale. Now, Paul's famous quote is solvent moving forward. That's not what I heard from the quotes from that meeting. That's not what I hear from what I was told by the superintendent in a letter to me. Now, the other footnote is obviously on the 21st, when he wrote that letter and when I received it on the 22nd, he expected me to be there the next Wednesday, which will tell people he didn't decide to terminate me until sometime on the 22nd before 6 o'clock, when he sent me a text to check my email because I was being placed on paid administrative leave. And he was recommending my termination on 27th, that next week. Well, that's odd.
That was after you. That was after
That
you
was
asked.
after the writ hit the court on public records. But people probably should know what happened on the 22nd of January. Everything that happened. And there are records that show what happened on the 22nd. And I want people to know that. But the most important thing is
Well, that's not anything that you feel comfortable talking about right now. The 20. Are you talking
not
about
at this time.
Okay.
Conclusion. I will tell you from behind the scenes, the superintendent is untrustworthy and he lacks ethical boundaries. Obviously, I have not only my own situation, but many others. The board's 7-0 vote condones this behavior, and that was my concern. If I do nothing and sit by while something unethical and inappropriate or improper occurs, I become part of it. The board is part of it. All the information, the almost 100 pages that I provided went directly to the board, was part of my complaint. Did they read it? I don't know.
So you're saying, what you're saying is the 7-0 vote, which is kind of endemic in Newport Mesa on the board. I mean, that seems to be the way it usually goes, 7-0. and it has in the past as well. So you're saying that that would be